So after I had worked in the Galapagos Islands as a scuba diving and wildlife guide, a friend of mine who was also a fellow guide out there, he had a travel company in Quito, Ecuador, and he had established a relationship with the Waodani Indians down in the Amazon jungle. And he asked me to go down there on a very unusual volunteer mission where the tribe wanted to build a tourist lodge, and so did he, to generate income, and he could expand his tour business down to the jungle. And he told me that the tribe members down there would not build that lodge unless he personally went down there or sent a representative to go down and just be there, because they needed someone to initiate the construction of the lodge, and he knew they wouldn't do it if somebody didn't come down there. So he asked me to go because he was too busy. And it sounded like an adventure to me, so I said, sure, I'll go. And he sent me on a 10-hour bus down to Shell Mera, which is right on the edge of the Amazon jungle. And from there, I was to meet a pilot at the little airport and fly back about an hour, hour and a half back into the jungle to this village, way out in the middle of nowhere. And so I go all the way down there. I meet this guy named Steve, and he's packing a little single-engine plane when I get there. And I throw my stuff in the back, and pretty quickly we take off, and we're flying out over the jungle in this. Just me and him. I'm in the pilot seat. I have the little, headset on, and we're talking over the microphone. And I asked him, Steve, how did you come to be out here? And he said that his parents were missionaries, and they brought him out there when he was a little kid. He was about 4 years old, and his dad and about 4 or 5 other guys were missionaries, and they were trying to reach the unreached native Indians who lived out in the jungle. And he described how they had made contact with these natives, and how they circled the plane around, and they dropped a rope with a bucket and gave them gifts and things like that. But ultimately how something had gone wrong, and that these Indians had speared his father to death along with these other men and destroyed their plane. And I was like, they killed your dad? And this was the first time I had ever heard the famous story, which they made a movie about, called The End of the Spear. This guy's name was Steve Saint, and his dad was Nate Saint, and along with the other missionaries, was killed down there. And all of a sudden, my trip, we are flying back into the jungle to meet the people who did this. And I'm being told this story from the kid whose dad it happened to, and I'm completely freaked out, and he says, oh, don't worry, they're much better now. And we fly over the treetops for about an hour, and we land on this little grass strip out in the middle of nowhere. And immediately about 100 or 150 native Indians come out there and surround the plane, many of whom are carrying spears and blowguns, and speaking the weirdest language I've ever heard in my life. I mean, the Waodani Indians speak this, what they call the clicking language, which is a and sounds like that. And Steve Saint, he speaks it perfectly, and he's talking to him, and I'm just, stunned by the whole thing. And but what really got me was when he unloaded some things from the plane. He unloaded my bag, and then and they loaded a couple other things onto the plane. And then he looks at his watch and he goes, "Well, I gotta go. I'll see you later." And I was like, What, wait a minute, you're leaving? You're kidding. I mean, I thought you were going to stay here with me. And he goes, oh, no, no. My wife and I have a little clinic, and it's, 2-day walk from here. And but I got to fly over there because it's getting dark right now, and I can't fly at night around here, so I'll see you later. And I was like, but you're not staying here with me? I thought you were staying. And he's like, oh, no, I got to get home. And so he gets in that plane and takes off and leaves me there with 150 of these natives, only 2 of whom speak Spanish. All the rest of them speak Waodani. And I am freaking clean out. I didn't expect that at all, and it was a bigger adventure right away than I thought it would be. And so I stay there, and they give me a little hut to stay in, and I spend the night in there. And the very next morning, at the crack of dawn, we hear this blood-curdling scream, just this ah! Out in the middle of the jungle. And somewhere across the village, somebody just screaming their head off. And I get up, and everybody's getting up, and they're running over there, and there's a bunch of this, everybody talking, what's going on, there's all this alarm. And so we all go running over, and I grab my little first aid kit, because it sounds like somebody's hurt over there. And I always carry this first aid kit wherever I go. And so we run over there, and this man has reached under his canoe and has been stabbed in between the fingers with a freshwater stingray. This slimy, spotted-looking thing has stuck its tail spine right in between his fingers and sunk it about 2 or 3 inches down there. And I mean, he is screaming bloody murder. And they grab him and they pull that thing out of him, and it's just horrendous, And there was nothing I could really do for him, They built a fire in his hut, and they put some green banana leaves on that fire, and they started making this smoke, and they had him put his hand over the smoke, and that was their solution to his injury, and it was awful. And but we all go back to whatever, we were doing and had breakfast. And I give a little speech that day on, why we're going to build this tourist hut. And I speak in Spanish, and my host, Moy, he speaks in Waodani, and he tells the tribe that, we're launching this project. And so most of my job is done at that point. But the pilot's not coming back for almost 3 weeks, so I'm out there. And so the next morning, we had all agreed that we're going to start this construction project. And I wake up very early, and I go outside of my hut, and there are about 20 to 25 people quietly sitting next to my hut and next to my host family's hut. None of them are saying a word. They're all just sitting there. And I kind of nod my head, good morning, how you doing? And then I go into my host family's hut, and I say, hey, there's a bunch of people out there. And they say, yeah, we know. And I said, are they here to help us with the construction project? And they said, no, I don't think they're going to help us with that. And I go, well, what are they here for? He said, well, they're here to see the doctor. And I go, oh, you guys have a doctor? And he goes, yeah, you. And I go, I'm not a doctor. They think I'm a doctor? And they said, yeah, no, you're the doctor. And I said, no, I'm not. And they said, no, but we saw you with the medical kit. And that's how they knew. And all night long, they were running through the jungle telling everybody that there was a doctor in the village, and that he would be seeing patients today. And I was going, I can't see these people. I'm not a doctor. And they said, oh, they would be very upset if you don't see them. They really, some of them walked all night to get here. You need to see them. We can't start the construction project out without you see the patients. And I'm like, okay, all right. So we start seeing these patients, and oh my gosh, the most god-awful tropical diseases. You got malaria, you got parasites, you got infections, you got the most horrible stuff you ever saw. And I mean, there was some of it I could help with. I had some neomycin powder, and I had some betadine scrubs, and I had some basic stuff, but most of it, I couldn't touch it. Intestinal problems, and in a tropical environment like that, there are some of the more ugly type of ailments. And so anyway, my biggest success was a guy. They had long, greasy hair, and the Wild Donny Indians have those big looped ears, on the side. They've looped their ears down, and that's handsome to them. And this guy had this long greasy hair, and he pulled his hair back, and that big looped ear was all swollen and horrible looking, and it looked like a giant Dunkin' Donut. and I won't tell you all about it, but just suffice to say it was not pretty. And I told him that if I was going to touch him, that he had to cut all his hair off, even shorter than mine is right now. And he didn't like that, and he went away angry. And I was kind of glad, because I didn't want to touch him anyway. But he came back after a while, and he had cut all his hair off, and we started scrubbing on that thing, and it took an hour just to scrub it clean, his whole ear inside and out. And I used a half a bottle of betadine just on his first cleaning, and then we sprinkled that betadine, or that neomycin powder, which is a good thing to have when you're in a tropical environment, because ointments and stuff, they just keep the wound wet, And so we sprinkled that ear, and it looked like a giant powdered donut. And we did that 2 or 3 times a day. And after about 3 or 4 days, it started draining, and the infection was leaving, and he got better. He's one of my greatest successes as a field doctor. And he gave me a little fire maker kit with 2 pieces of wood, that you rub together, and just to say thank you. And so that was my initiation into the Amazon jungle.